So, viewer Francisco Martin asked me to do a ship on capital ship operating, or do a show on capital ship operating expenses. He's looking to get a hammerhead. What do I think of the idea? What are the problems that you might run into? And it's a fairly interesting topic. Now, is there a basis to expect to be able to operate a capital ship and, not basically run yourself broke? Yeah, they have already said that they're setting up missions, around the idea of bringing a hammerhead to do these missions. So obviously, they want you out there operating capital ships. Is there a precedent for that in the game? Well, there's often detractors to this idea on the forums. There are people who believe that it shouldn't be profitable. They will use the modern sort of U.S. Navy or whatever Navy from whatever country they're from. They'll say, that is not something that is operated at a profit. So based on that, operating a capital combat ship is something that you shouldn't be able to operate at a profit either. Well, not exactly, because let's say you have a capital ship like a hammerhead and you're a pirate and you capture a hull E, you take it over and you bring that ship into port. Obviously you're going to make a profit, and you had to incur no expense to load that ship up with all its cargo. I mean, you might incur minor expenses and wear and tear and fuel on your ship, but generally you think that a hull E is going to more than cover that and pay off your crew and yourself quite nicely. So the mechanism for getting a payout out of a capital ship is already something that we know is going to be in game. The question of profitability, well, I think that depends on I think it depends more on the aggressiveness of the captain. Now, of course, that covers the pirate end of things, but, you might not be a pirate. You might be, well, minion, my captain's name is going to be Johnny Space Justice, and I will not engage in any such ribaldry, sir. It doesn't matter, because let's say you're fighting the Vanduul. Are Vanduul ships just going to disappear after they blow up? Is there going to be no wreck? Are you not able to capture one of those ships? Now, a while ago I made a video where people were freaking out because the Javelin was it was limited. You could only acquire so many of them, and people were going, oh my god, I'm never going to get the destroyer I want. I said, maybe not. You might be able to capture a Vanduul destroyer. You never know. And one viewer did point out quite correctly, quite possibly correctly, that the Vanduul ships may not be finished on the interior. CIG might just fake them for a while until that gets built out, so there's no guarantee that you could capture that ship. But even if true, think about the material value of that ship, right? So let's say you're out there operating capital ships. If you're in a pretty decently built out group, you may have a reclaimer with you that can just sit there and just rip up the wrecks that you're creating and thereby create a profit for the whole group. Now, it requires a little bit more organization, of course, but it is possible. And I mean, you have to realize that with the addition of missions designed around capital ships, that it's probably going to be pretty standard practice for a lot of the local governors or the UAE Navy to employ private contractors to provide system security against Vanduul, against pirates, something like that. So all the mechanisms that you really need to make capital ships profitable are already there, and the idea that capital ships should be profitable seems to be the direction that CIG is going. At least the groundwork is all there. That I think that gives kind of a strong indicator to the fact that with missions and mechanisms like salvage, it's fairly reasonable to expect that you can operate a capital ship at a profit. However, note the fact that I said salvage, because a hammerhead is obviously not a salvage ship. An Idris is not a salvage ship, nor is a javelin, yada yada yada. You get my point. A reclaimer is a salvage ship. A vulture is a salvage ship. Now, some people might go and say, oh, will a vulture fit inside of a Polaris or an Idris or something like that? And I'm sure those threads are coming. But it raises an interesting point, because it may be that, you know, your rewards for operating a capital ship, just going out and blowing things up, might not be all that great. They might be enough to offset the expense of operating the ship, offset the expense of a crew, and the wear and tear, which is something in 3.3 that we're going to start to see, the degradation of modules, oddly enough, coming with the hammerhead. So if those two things hit, which they better, then, you know, we might start to get an idea of how capital ships are going to work out. But, you know, when I was talking about salvage, it may be that the most profitable way to operate a capital ship is in an organized group. Because you might look at a reclaimer and say, well, the reclaimer doesn't really have all these combat capabilities, so you can't really use it as a combat ship minion. True. But a reclaimer working in conjunction with other capital ships, they're blowing them up and then he's chewing them up. That could elevate the profit of that operation. All of a sudden the reclaimer gets access to wrecks that it may not be able to get access to on its own, and the capital ships get access to another revenue stream that otherwise they would not have, or just the efficiency of the operation goes up because they don't have to worry about getting out of their ship, maybe trying to salvage a few parts or, you know, get that extra money. Now they've got a ship going out and doing that for them. So it may be that even though you can operate a capital ship and stay ahead of your expenses and the wear and tear of your modules, there may be better ways to do it. And of course, you know, gaming being the way that it is these days, I'm sure there are going to be a ton of spreadsheets on Google Docs that will tell you, oh, you know, this amount of ships, you know, this amount of capital ships, you go, you do these missions, and then bring a couple of reclaimers with you, and this will get to the point where everybody's making, you know, 110,000 UEC, you know, every 30 minutes or whatever. You know, we're just throwing numbers out. We're spitballing. We don't know what the exact numbers are going to be. But, you know, obviously there are people who are going to math these things out and say what's profitable, what isn't profitable, what works, what doesn't work. So there's going to be a lot of guidelines, but it really looks like CIG is going in the direction of they don't want to prohibit you from operating a capital ship and enjoying it and possibly turning a healthy profit. But at the same time, they're probably going to use systems like salvage and refueling and things like that to make it so that you can enrich the experience and earn greater rewards for doing so. The bigger the group that you bring, the more sophisticated your group and your basically your fleet build is, the more rewards and the more returns that you can draw from that. So baseline, it looks like they're going for doable, but if you're willing to incur the logistical expenses of getting a group together and bringing multiple ships, then you're probably going to be better off. Now, this is of course by no means guaranteed, right? This is simply an interpretation of what I see playing out with the components, with, you know, the pieces that we see out there on the battlefield. This is what I kind of see as something that's probably going to emerge from all of this. You know, and once again, that is of course tainted by my experience in the past, you know, as a raider and whatnot. That's kind of where I look at these points. I say, that's my interpretation of where this is going to go, how that ball is going to bounce. But it may end up going a different way. This is simply, from my experience, this is what I see as being the likely outcome. So, will it work out this way? I think that there's a strong possibility that it will, but it is by no means guaranteed. This is just my expectation, and obviously I've given the reasons for it. So that's what I see going forward. I think capital ships are going to be survivable, slightly profitable solo, but in order to really get the big rewards, in order to really, get to the point where you're making the kind of money that not only overcomes the expense of operating a capital ship, but puts you in the place where you can buy those super expensive capital ship modules and get all the pieces together to really get the most out of your capital ship, you're probably going to have to move into almost a group play arena where you're getting together with other capital ship owners, other fighter, pilots and whatnot, and you are basically working together to achieve a much more complex mission or a much more complex objective, and therefore earning a far higher rewards, right? So yeah, if you went out there and you bought an Idris, and you bought an Idris, and maybe you bought a few game packages, and you bought 3 Gladiuses to put on your Idris, and you just want to be the captain of your warship and send your fighters out and have your turrets manned by NPCs and all that, I think that is going to be playable. I think that's going to be survivable, though not exactly like endlessly profitable. I think that is going to be something that is going to be more, not so much hidden behind a paywall in terms of your money, but hidden behind a paywall in terms of your time that you have to invest in organizing the right group in order to tackle much harder content and earn much higher rewards. Anyways, that's the show for today. I hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for watching.
Thank you for watching. So if you want to keep up with the latest and greatest in Star Citizen and Squadron 42's development, please follow us on our social media channels. See you soon.